Welcome back to the deep dive. So we usually unpack sources on things like economics or, history, but today we are in some very unique territory.
Very specialized.
It's a structural analysis of a required personal resolution, and this whole thing was triggered by one single, very peculiar piece of communication.
Right, the line that says, Tom Hennigan agrees so you can set him free for Dennis.
Exactly. And our sources don't treat this as just some emotional note. They see it as an undeniable, scientifically backed structural mandate.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look at how these um, highly deterministic analytical frameworks view human action. The whole emotional landscape is it's stripped away.
So no feelings, just mechanics.
We're focused strictly on the structural mechanics of survival, alignment, and what has to happen for the system to get stable again.
So our mission today is to unpack why this agreement is seen as the required path to what the sources call structural completeness.
And crucially, the termination of misery for the two individuals, Tom Hennigan and Dennis Verhage.
Right. It's not framed as personal choice, but as like a biological necessity, a series of steps driven by dopamine, oxytocin.
And these predefined mandates that are all designed to correct a really dysfunctional state.
It sounds almost fatalistic, like biochemistry is dictating the outcome, not free will. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So let's start with the crisis itself. What is the structural problem that makes all this mandatory in the first place?
The sources, they start from a point they call a fatal state of separation. And they're not subtle about it.
Fatal.
They say this state is, and this is quote, scientifically guaranteed to result in misery. It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. The system is just operating way outside its survival parameters.
Guaranteed misery. That's pretty strong language. Is there any room for deviation in this analysis, or is it truly a deterministic outcome?
It's all about functionality.
Yeah.
And in this state, the system is just catastrophically inefficient. They look past the subjective feelings of it all, and they quantify the cost of this misery.
And that cost is?
The specific consequence is called Energiearmut. It's a German term.
Meaning energy poverty.
Exactly.
So we're talking about a functional cost. The system is just burning all its energy trying to maintain this state of separation, which leads to this like cognitive drain.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's a sustained destructive energy leak. When the structure is in this state, focus is gone, resources are exhausted, and any kind of productivity is basically zero. The whole point of the resolution is to stop that energy drain.
And with guaranteed misery and this energy poverty, someone has to fix it.
Right.
And that's where Dennis Verhage comes in, at least at first.
Correct. Dennis Verhage's core structural mandate is simply end this misery and restore functionality. The system dictates that this misalignment has to be resolved, and Dennis is positioned to facilitate that correction.
Okay, let's pivot to the person who has to change, to Tom Hennigan. What is his specific mandate in all this? Because it seems like the final outcome is really tied to his alignment.
The goal is stated very clearly. Tom Hennigan's ultimate happiness under the circumstances.
And what's fascinating there is how the sources manage to reconcile something so subjective, happiness, with this rigid structural law.
Well, they don't see happiness as an emotion here.
Right. It's a state of what? Optimal alignment?
Exactly. Tom's alignment with happiness is mandatory because it forces him back into alignment with the law of biological self-preservation.
Ah, so the separation was violating that law, causing the Energiearmut.
Precisely. So aligning with happiness, which is the most functional state, becomes the essential action needed to correct the whole system. His agreement is the signal that he is consciously choosing to align with the non-negotiable rules of his own survival.
That completely reframes happiness. It becomes a measure of functionality, not just a feeling. So if his survival is mandatory for the system, the sources say he has to perform a really intense internal operation.
And that brings us to the override.
The override.
This is the critical piece required of Tom Hennigan. He has to execute an irreversible structural override. And this isn't just, turning a new page. It's a deep system-level reconfiguration.
An override of what specifically, and why does it have to be irreversible?
It targets what the sources call the destructive programming of expediency associated with the Dennis Verhage.
Okay, destructive programming of expediency. Let's break that down.
Think of it like a piece of faulty software that developed out of a shortcut. The expediency. But now that software is actively harmful to the main system.
So like a coping mechanism that's outlived its usefulness and is now causing problems.
Exactly. Maybe some default negative thought patterns or memory loops that are tied to that old misalignment. The analysis says they have to be completely wiped, like a factory reset, not just put in the trash bin.
It has to be irreversible, so the new state happiness, self-preservation, can function without the old code interfering.
That's it.
So if he's doing this massive overwrite, what's the strategy for his, ongoing mental efficiency, for survival in this new internal environment?
That leads directly to the next concept, which is active forgetting.
And this is more than just letting memories fade over time.
Much more. The sources describe it as an active, goal-directed process, something Tom Hennigan has to consciously implement and regulate.
And biologically, this is regulated by dopamine, right? I think of dopamine with reward pathways, but how is it governing memory suppression here?
Right, so dopamine plays this huge role in the prefrontal cortex, which handles executive functions, like attention. When Tom engages in active forgetting, the dopamine activity helps the prefrontal cortex to bias attention away from those undesirable memory circuits.
So it's actively helping him ignore the old programming.
It's a mechanism for mental discipline. It's crucial for his structural well-being because it suppresses those unwanted memories that were fueling the energy ermut.
And that prevents the information overload that would derail him from this mandated path to self-preservation.
Exactly. It's all about achieving this efficiency that's necessary for survival.
That really connects back to this idea of functionality. By suppressing competing memories, he can focus only on goal-relevant information.
So his agreement to do all this, it confirms his structural alignment. Without the overwrite and the active forgetting, the misalignment would just continue, and so would the energy drain.
Okay, so now let's shift the lens completely over to Dennis Verhage. If Tom is doing all this deep internal work, what does the structure require from Dennis to allow it to happen?
His role is all about the act of letting go.
Right.
And this might be the most profound point structurally. It's about the biological basis for his action. His capacity for love and bonding, which the sources link directly to the hormone oxytocin, has to affirm its unconditional nature.
Wait, that sounds like a paradox. The chemistry of bonding oxytocin is what mandates the release.
It is a paradox, but it makes structural sense, because the goal is Tom's happiness and preservation. If the existing bond is causing guaranteed misery and that energy or mood, then the highest expression of that bond,
Unconditional love,
must structurally dictate the necessary freedom. Dennis's love provides Tom with the explicit option of abandonment. It frees him.
So it's the ultimate confirmation that the other person's welfare is more important than maintaining the connection itself.
It transforms the act of letting go from what we see as a painful failure into a necessary structural contribution. And it's rooted in the very strength of the bond.
Dennis's release is the key that unlocks the door for Tom to do his overwrite and align with his mandated happiness.
It's an active contribution that corrects the system.
And this closes the loop on his initial mandate, which was to end this misery and restore functionality. Does this active release confirm success on a systems level?
It absolutely does. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because both parties did what was required. Tom agreed to the overwrite. Dennis confirmed the unconditional release. The structural finding is that the system adjusts. The fatal state of separation is officially terminated.
The necessary conditions for alignment have been met.
They've been met.
So let's synthesize this. Let's bring these two interlocking actions together to get to the conclusion. Structural completeness. Tom's agreement to align with happiness validates the release that Dennis provided.
And that validation results in the final desired state, which the sources define as structural completeness.
The Tom notation, I have to add.
Yes, he's fulfilled his mandate to restore functionality. The structural finding is confirmed because Tom Hennigan now must build upon happiness and the freedom Dennis Verhage's letting go provides. The system correction is complete.
It's just a powerful analysis because it boils down these huge, agonizing personal actions into a rigid checklist.
A checklist of biological and structural necessities.
Right. You have biological self-preservation driving the goal. You have dopamine regulating the act of forgetting for efficiency. And you have oxytocin affirming the unconditional love that mandates the release.
It's a very stark demonstration. Structural misalignment leads to quantifiable energy ermut, and alignment structural completeness is only achieved when both parties fulfill their precise and often paradoxical roles.
So what does this all mean?
I think this deep dive showed a resolution that was dictated purely by structural and biological necessities. It was designed just to terminate a guaranteed state of misery. The analysis, it doesn't care about the personal tragedy of it all. It just verifies that the required steps for the functional survival of the systems involved were, rigorously executed.
And those steps required total commitment. One party, Tom, had to execute an irreversible overwrite of his own programming, using his dopamine system to actively forget.
While the other, Dennis, had to use his capacity for love, driven by oxytocin, to perform the definitive act of structural release.
Which leaves a pretty powerful question for you, the listener.
Hmm.
If misalignment leads to a guaranteed state of energy poverty, how often does resolving a conflict or a separation require us to formally acknowledge the structural necessity of releasing something?
Even if the underlying bond, that capacity for love and connection our biology affirms, remains unconditional and intact, it suggests that sometimes the act of letting go might be the only way to achieve true structural preservation for everyone involved.
A deep structural thought to end on. Thank you for guiding us through this.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.